All right, welcome to Amtgard Leadership University. This is our next panel here at the Gathering of the Clans 2016. This one is actually coming to you from a request, multiple requests from Crown and Flame. Crown and Flame is another leadership resource available on Facebook and at crownandflame.org. This is a repeated question that they've never really felt comfortable trying to come up with a good solution. So we decided we're just going to get some of the important folks on there. And that question is, what is the Circle of Monarchs? Who are they? And how do they affect Amtgard? So we're going to spend the next couple minutes just talking about what is a Circle of Monarchs. We've built a pretty substantial panel, both some seasoned Circle of Monarchs representatives, folks who have attended them multiple times. We've got Nim'Ruin, who hasn't attended a single one yet, so he's trying to figure out what tomorrow is going to be like, and everything in between. What I'm going to ask, just like every other Amtgard Leadership University panel, starting on my left, if you would, do a quick introduction, who you are, where you're from, and maybe a point or two that you want to make sure we cover during the conversation today. So, Nim'Ruin?
Lord Nim'Ruin, I'm the current king of Kingdom of Crystal Groves. I give a new perspective. I've only been playing for 2.5 years, and it's been an interesting experience for me. I think the best thing to do is to explain to people what exactly the Circle of Monarchs does, and we'll discuss that.
I'm Sir Promethea. I'm from Belfrost and Goldenvale, and while I'm not on the Circle of Monarchs, I'm the XCOM secretary this year, so this is my first clan and my first time in the Circle of Monarchs. Hopefully, I'm just hoping we'll talk about why it is important to have a Circle of Monarchs meeting in the first place, and how you can get more involved with your Circle of Monarchs representatives for when they do come and vote every year.
My name is Senor Sponge. I'm from the Celestial Kingdom, in Joesburg, West March. Basically, I'm on the Amtgard International Board of Directors, and I'm here to answer questions.
And I'm Medryn. I'm from the Iron Mountains. I've been on the Circle of Monarchs as a monarch, as a rules representative, and as the rules representative organizer. And now I'm functioning as the attorney for Amtgard International. And I want to talk specifically about some of the changes that have happened specifically this year, because while it's not going to change how the Circle of Monarchs works, the Circle of Monarchs has changed roles because it's actually now has a role within Amtgard International. We'll chat a little bit about what that means and what that looks like.
Great, thank you. One thing I would ask you to remember is, although I've got the pleasure of sitting on the front row right here next to you, I actually need you to speak all the way to the back row so that not only the volunteers, but those in attendance in the back can hear you. And it also helps the microphones whenever we got to do all the editing afterwards. So, Sponge, what is the Circle of Monarchs?
It's kind of an organization within Amtgard of all the elected representative leaders who band together and kind of dictate policy and the organization for Amtgard. Okay.
So by elected representatives, primarily it's the Kingdom Monarchs themselves, right? And then anybody. Okay.
Yeah.
JP, or Medryn, you want to expand on that at all?
Sure. So the big news that came out of last year's Circle of Monarchs meeting is that the Burning Lands gave Amtgard to Amtgard, which is really freaking cool. And what that means is the Circle of Monarchs voted to create a corporation to control, well, not really even control, but to own and govern the overarching area of Amtgard. And as part of that, that corporation made a committee of the corporation that is the Circle of Monarchs. And there's a representative from every kingdom in Amtgard who comes and sits on that body. And that body actually gets to make decisions that are binding on the overall corporation. There are a board of directors that are the specific elected directors of the corporation, but those directors are by and large elected by the Circle of Monarchs. So the way, from a real world and legal perspective, the Circle of Monarchs is actually a body of the corporation, and it's, while not technically the highest governing body, it's the body with the most amount of control in that corporation in terms of what the corporation does, what policies are, what policies kingdoms all over Amtgard need to be following, and to help address any issues that kingdoms all over Amtgard have.
Okay, so if I understand you right, we've got Amtgard was given to the greater Amtgard, the people, who then the Circle of Monarchs on their behalf established a corporation in the AIBOD, and then from there on, the AIBOD is doing their corporate level work on behalf of the Circle of Monarchs as their reps. Is that?
That's pretty accurate.
Just trying to get some parameters in there, because then my next question is, if that's the case, Promethea, you mentioned the executive committee. Who are they?
It's hard for me to explain, and I feel like Medryn might be able to do a better job explaining than I can, honestly.
You can punt to Medryn if you like.
I'm going to.
Okay, so the Circle of Monarchs, and this is kind of a historical overview, the Circle of Monarchs over the past, I guess, about 10 years has been getting more and more responsibility for governing Amtgard as we've shifted to a more national organization. And the Circle of Monarchs is great. The idea of having a representative from each kingdom is fantastic, but the way Amtgard's traditionally set up is monarchs change every 6 months. And as anybody who has any kind of corporate governance experience knows, the big boards can't necessarily do everything all the time. So what they do is they designate portions of management to certain people. So the Circle of Monarchs created what's called the Executive Committee, or the XCOM. And these are the people who kind of run herd on the Circle of Monarchs to make sure that what the Circle of Monarchs wants done gets done. So the Circle of Monarchs says, do X, and the Executive Committee says, okay, let's get that done. And the Executive Committee consists of the chair of the Executive Committee, the secretary of the Executive Committee, and then a representative from Kingdom of the Burning Lands. And right now those roles are filled by Randall is the pro tem chairman, Promethea is the secretary, and is Kaliana still the representative?
It's somebody else. It's a gentleman whose name escapes me at this second.
I don't remember who the Burning Lands representative is, but their job is essentially to do the will of the Circle of Monarchs on the ground.
Okay. Sponge, you've attended in various capacities at a number of Circle of Monarchs meetings. What's tomorrow going to be like?
Long, arduous. It'll basically be. It's a rules election year, isn't it?
We have rules stuff to go over.
So what I imagine there'll basically be a conversation about the current state of Amtgard and how things are operating from a business aspect. There'll be an update from the AIBOD. There will be a long, drawn-out conversation about rules changes where the different kingdoms can do that, can push through rules changes or deny rules changes. There'll actually be a State of Amtgard report. I don't know.
We've got 2 kingdom pre-bids this year and 1 kingdom bid. We have all the rules revisions. We have an Amtgard resources report. We have the ombudsman reports. And we have a couple other things like talking about state of Amtgard. There's a sexual harassment policy talk this year. You've got the Amtgard Cares thing that Goldcrest is doing. So basically, anything that's going to come up Amtgard-wide is going to come up in the next day or so.
Okay, mentioned kingdom pre-bids. The Circle of Monarchs makes kingdoms?
So it does in a sense, because you have to in order to become a kingdom, you have to do a pre-bid and then a bid in front of the Circle of Monarchs, and then it is the kingdoms themselves that decide if another group becomes a kingdom. So this year we have Northreach and Winter's Edge in pre-bid stage. So they're saying we are for the next year, the next 2 years perhaps, going to attempt to become a kingdom. And then we have Polaris, who is on their kingdom bid year. So they're submitting to become a kingdom finally.
Okay.
So generally with that, what'll happen is they'll have some paperwork, show statistics on how many people are playing, their attendance, their financial state, will include their corpora, things like that, and basically present it to the Circle of Monarchs. Give copies to everybody, and then they'll review it. They probably should have reviewed it before they got here, and then there'll basically be yay or nay. They'll kind of pitch to the group saying, we want to be a kingdom, and this is why we want to be a kingdom. This is why we have the numbers to be a kingdom. This is why we have the statistics to be a kingdom. And this is why we're going to be a really good kingdom. And then it's up to the Circle of Monarchs to decide whether or not we want to accept them as the newest kingdom of Amtgard.
Okay. Only because I don't want to go too long. Nim'Ruin, what do you think tomorrow? What are your expectations for tomorrow as a new king and a first-time COM attendee?
I don't know, probably walking into a den of wolves. Just kidding. I actually have I'm actually curious to see how it is. I've heard a lot of good things. I've heard it's long. I went over a lot of the things that we had to go over before coming here, and I think majority of the mindset is set up already. So I hope there's not a huge amount of discussion on everything, but if there is, I'm totally for it. I'm just kind of excited and curious of what it's all about, and I'll probably be coming back.
Medryn, you attended as a king. Sponge, did you also attend as a king?
Yes.
Nim'Ruin's a king, and Promethea, this is the first time at bat, and you're also secretary, so you have to corral them all. Sorry in advance, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
But,
good luck.
So what kind of, and I'm going to go through all three of you. So what do you do as a representative, king, queen, emperor, whatever the title, but what are some things that you do to prepare for the Circle of Monarchs meeting?
We've gotten much more organized than we used to be. Like, it used to be you'd show up and somebody'd say, oh, by the way, here are the things that we're going to talk about today. And and we used to raise things like in the middle of the meeting, like, hey, we want to do this. And everybody was like, nobody talked about it, but sure. We've gotten much better about putting out agendas, 30 days or so ahead of time, and saying, here are the items we're going to talk about. Here are the rules proposals that are going to be voted on, so check with your kingdom. So the important thing I felt like was to know what all the issues were and to get a sense of what my kingdom wanted us to do on those issues and those items. Because ultimately, your job as a monarch is to represent the will of your people at the Circle of Monarchs. And at the same time, hopefully move the game in the right direction while doing so. So preparation-wise is getting the sense of your kingdom's will on whatever issues you have to address in any given circle.
Sponge, your experience about the same?
Yeah, more or less. When I was monarch, it was years ago when Taldagor became a kingdom, and really the only thing that we kind of seemed to have had some pre-knowledge to were like the rules changes that were up for that one, and then some of the Taldagor information for their kingdom status. And that meeting was just kind of awkward, and that the things were being raised up in the middle of it. But it's gotten a lot cleaner now. This will be my third meeting in a row. The last two I've been rules rep for the CK, and it's getting a lot better.
Nim'Ruin, what did you do to prep?
Well, I spoke to my populace. I took, actually it's been very organized, and I actually really do appreciate it, because I know I sent Sir Randall a PM, and it was like, I have no idea what's going on right now. I was like, so, but on eSamurai, they post out the agenda. Medryn does a great job with the rules rep of putting it down on what we need to talk about. So I share that and ask my populace what their opinions of it. And I'm pretty much set on what I want to vote for, except one issue, and it's kind of 50-50 in my populace. So it's just like, I think it's about being organized yourself and actually understanding what is on the agenda, and so you can give an accurate vote.
Okay. So covered a little bit about how the process is going to go, who's sitting at the table, the prep that was done. There was mention of the executive committee as a subcommittee. Rules rep. Obviously, I already know this, but so there's a rules rep. Can we talk a little bit about the rules change process and how the comm plays into that?
Sure. So again, that was actually kind of the origination of the modern Circle of Monarchs was this decision that the Circle of Monarchs was going to have control over the rulebook, and the rulebook was not going to be just kind of handed down by fiat, that we were going to get the Circle of Monarchs really involved in it. And that was, again, about 10 years ago that really started. And since then, we've really codified the process so that the way it works is every kingdom has a rules representative. And those people, plus myself as the rules representative organizer, form kind of the Amtgard Rules Committee. And what happens is, over the course of the year, people talk about, hey, here's things that are weird in the rulebook, here's things we don't understand. And then do we have 7 18 kingdoms now?
18.
18. So the 18 rules reps get together, and not physically get together, but they all put in proposals as to what their kingdom feels like needs to be adjusted or changed in the rulebook. And that's actually all transparent. You can see that it's up on ESAM in the rules revision forum. You can see all those posts and those discussions. Some of that's migrated to Facebook a little bit, but we try to keep an official record because trying to find anything on Facebook is awful. But ESAM at least gives us a permanent-ish record of what was discussed. So the reps put together their rules changes, what they think are appropriate, and then I do an initial pass and review those, and anything that's unclear, I go back to the reps and say, hey guys, what are we doing here? Like, let's flesh this out, let's make this a real proposal. If there's some proposals that I deem are completely inappropriate, I have the ability to say, yeah, no, we're not adding, murder clown as a class to the Amtgard rulebook. That's not going to happen. But then once I've cleaned up the proposals and got them a little more organized, I throw them out to the reps and I say, okay, what of these have a chance to pass? Because the way the rules revision process works is the Circle of Monarchs has to have a 75% vote to actually change something in the rulebook, to add those things to the rules. So there were years where we literally did nothing but rules and it took us 8 hours because there were so many proposals and so much discussion and so many options. And a lot of them didn't get any headway, right? Because they were like, even if you have a 50-50 split, you're not gonna make a change in the rules. So as we've gone along, I've gotten much more serious about polling the reps and saying, all right guys, which of these have a shot to pass? Because I don't want to waste the COM's time discussing something that is not going to go anywhere at all. So I kind of set a threshold and basically said, if you can't get 2/3 of the reps to say, hey, the Circle of Monarchs needs to talk about this. And the way we do it is not, yes, I'm in favor of this proposal. I don't care what your personal feelings are. I want to know whether you think it's a proposal that the Circle of Monarchs needs to pay attention to. And if we can get 2/3 of the reps to say, yeah, then we put it onto the docket. So I think we have like 12 rules change proposals that we have to discuss this year. And there were 26 or 28 that came in to the process that we whittled down. So we do kind of a lot of winnowing. We get kind of all of Amtgard's proposals that the reps then discard and winnow down, and then I cut through them, and then the reps themselves cut through them again, and then we give them to the Circle of Monarchs to vote, so that the Circle of Monarchs doesn't have to spend 8 hours discussing whether you can throw your shield or not.
Sponge, you said you're rules rep again this year for Celestial Kingdom?
No, I don't know who is, honestly.
Okay. But in the past you have been. Right?
Yeah, I have in the past, yes.
So thoughts on the perspective from that end? I mean,
it's a lot less wild west than it was when 10 years ago, 5 years ago. It's being streamlined. Medryn's doing in my opinion, a pretty phenomenal job of keeping it short and sweet, which is needed. It's kind of more or less it. Like, there's not really a whole lot to it. You just kind of show up and pull your people, see what they feel about things.
How's the rules rep organizer elected or appointed in Celestial Kingdom?
Who's Gonna Clan has been it a couple times. So generally, I think we have an election once a year. I think shortly after Clan, during in all things, and it's just kind of who's interested, who's qualified, and give a little speech why you want to do it, and then that person or somebody gets elected, and there you go.
How about Golden Veil?
I'm pretty sure it's just nomination, and it's traditionally been the same person the last couple of years because there's only so many people who feel interested in doing it. I think that might just be a lack of awareness, but like it's been Bowen the last couple of years.
Okay. Crystal Gross?
When someone runs for king, we like to send our monarch out. It is a flight. For me, it's a flight. I'm not driving. That's nuts. But it's more so that I would be edged for someone who would say they're actually going to go to clan. That was one of my things when I ran for king, is I'm going to clan. I've already bought my ticket. I'm going to go. I want to experience clan because I've heard great things about it. So that helps too. And what I really think is that a lot of kingdoms should probably get together, especially further kingdoms that are further away, and do fundraisers, because Goldenville did one this year that I was a part of, and I bought a lot of stuff. But to help pay for their monarch to go out there, because not everybody can drop $600 on a plane ticket or take time out to go out there. You know, if your kingdom wants a rep to be there, they should send one.
Kind of to further that point, like, this Circle of Monarchs meeting is the most important meeting in the entirety of the 365 days between meetings. It's something that you really, as a kingdom, should have your monarch or have a good, solid representative there who's going to do a thorough job and not, not treat it like it's something social and it's just something for fun. It's far and away the most important meeting, and doing things like having fundraisers to be able to get people there is really a solid idea and something that I think kingdoms should do.
Do they only meet at Clan? Anyone?
So the only time that there's a in-person meeting of the Circle of Monarchs is at Clan, just because it's the Clan event. I mean, it's the big Amtgard event of the year. But they do a lot of business online. We work really hard to get them to do business online. And again, all of this stuff that happens between the meetings is, much thanks to the executive committee, who have worked their tails off to get things organized and make this a more professional, more well-run institution. So there's lots of, if something pops up in the middle of the year, they do votes on it. The executive chair will say, hey, we have something that we need to vote on, we need to address it. Monarchs, please pay attention, please come vote. And they do that voting again on the Electric Samurai. You can see there's a Circle of Monarchs section that has topics that people can raise and discuss. There's also a Facebook group that is an open Facebook group. You can't post in it, but everybody can see it. And that group serves kind of as a more kind of in-your-face organizational tool, because everybody's got Facebook now, or almost everybody has Facebook now, and it pops up in your inbox. Hey, you've got a new message, go look. But there is business that goes on throughout the year. It's just not quite as big. They try to save most of the big discussion and votes for the yearly meeting at Clan.
Okay, and that includes the rules revision process. That's all centered?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and the way the rules revision process is currently decided is proposals are made one year, and then the COM can say, we don't want to do those, or they can say, let's play test those and see if they work, see if they're a good idea, and then they go into a year of play testing and they're officially voted on the next year. So what we have this year is we have approval for the changes that we play tested last year, and then we have review of the possible changes that we're going to see about play testing for the next year.
Where can a player find those? I mean, because we're talking multi-year and things like that, and what's in play test versus what's approved. Where can a player find that information?
So, mea culpa, I did a really bad job last year. I didn't actually publish here are the things that are going to be play tested directly to the kingdoms. That's my bad. I got distracted because there was a lot of other work that we ended up having to do for the Circle of Monarchs immediately after Clan last year.
Sure.
But you can actually find them in the Circle of Monarchs minutes. The minutes of the meeting are taken every year, and they're pretty detailed minutes. I mean, they're not just like here's the vote, here's the results. There's a pretty detailed listing of what the discussion was and what people thought one way or the other. And those are posted on Electric Samurai in the Circle of Monarchs section as well. So that's where you would have found it last year. This year, I'm going to do a better job, I promise, and I'll get the things that were passed for playtesting, I'll get them posted probably in the rules revision section so that everybody can see what they are. I'll also post them on the Facebook groups and get
great.
those out there.
So I don't want to spend too much time on what's about to be the Medryn panel. But let's talk about the rules reps themselves. Okay, we're gonna kick this on the sponge first, but other than participating in Clan, what makes a good rules rep?
Open communication, like really listening to the people in your kingdom, Polling people, saying, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Like, there's some conversation about potentially changing this. What do you think? Really just being available. Proactive, available, communicating, and just kind of engaging the kingdom. And like, these are potential changes. What would you like to see change? And when somebody says, "Oh, well, I want to be able to throw my shield," you say, "Well, we already discussed that. Like, sorry, it's not going to happen, or maybe that will." And you just kind of try to be the best you can at it, and really pay attention to what's going on and get things going.
From not a rules rep perspective, has Bowen done anything that you're like, wow, that's something that everybody should be doing? Or
Not like per se. He's just been like really communicative rules rep. So like when something comes up, we know about it really quickly and we get the chance to discuss it really quickly, which I know in the past was not really a thing in our kingdom. Rules changes would just be sort of announced around the time they were going to come up, and we wouldn't really have a lot of say in them. So like the years that Bowen has been doing them, we've at least known what is going to happen, which has been a vast improvement over previous years.
Nim'Ruin, thoughts?
To be honest, when I took over King, I didn't even know there was a rules rep. I got a message by my friend Ryan Full, Lord Prada, and he's like, "I'm kind of the rules rep every year. They just automatically assume." I was like, "Well, congratulations, you're going to be it this year as well." And he actually, he told me that he had messaged Medryn and asked how the process worked, and he explained the process, which was really good. So I think awareness is probably really key for this to actually get rules out there. And I think the rules rep should be common sense as well. Like if someone wants a murder clown as a class, no, that sounds terrible actually. But so if they have he has a good common sense, I was okay with picking him, but he would pretty much tell you if that was a bad idea or a good idea, and then what he feels he would send up. So I think awareness is great key there.
Medryn, how about you? Have you seen any best practices? Like, these are the rules reps we need every year. These are the things they need to be doing.
Yeah, so I know different kingdoms are allowed to choose their rules reps however they want. I think the rule book says that they're appointed, but obviously the kingdoms can say, well, we're going to appoint them by all thing, however they want to do it. I will tell you that I think best practices from an overall kingdom perspective is to not change your rules rep every year. The entire point is to have someone who has some consistency and knows the process and can be involved. I'm not saying they have to be there forever, but let someone be involved and get a sense of what's going on so that they can be an advisor. Their job is really to be an advisor to the monarch in terms of rules issues, and to be the interface with the rest of Amtgard as far as rules issues. So best practices are going to be one, like, be aware of what's going on. I mean, I try to spam the boards when we're talking about things in rules reps, but be plugged in, be keyed in, check the rules reps forum, check the rules page, and know what's going on. Two, be communicative to me, like, hey, I'm the rules rep. I'm the rules rep for CK this year. What's going on? What are we talking about? Let's do that. And be engaged. I know it's kind of hard because there's about 8 months of the year that not a lot goes on from a rules rep perspective, but those last 4 months of the year before clan are pretty important, and I need you plugged in. I need you to be aware and be plugged in with your people. Bowen has been great because he's like, he put polls up on that his kingdom had access to, got people to vote, got people to make suggestions. Like, he was really active about that. Casca has done the same sort of thing with the Iron Mountains. So be engaged, be proactive in what's going on, and be communicative about it. Don't just be like, oh, I'm the rules rep, I'm sure there's something I have to be doing. The other thing that is really important is, as we've moved into this like playtesting phase, which is something that we did throughout the course of V8, but it's fairly new in terms of having a static rulebook and doing playtesting, is your job as a rules rep is to gather feedback so that you can say to your monarch, hey, our kingdom hates this change, you need to vote no. Or so they can say, this is great, let's push for it. And that's the other thing that I ask the rules reps to be doing, is to be gathering feedback. So the more that they can be plugged in and aware and doing their job kind of over the course of the year, even though there's not a lot of push to do it, is very important.
Okay. Let's talk about the subcommittees, back to the Circle of Monarchs. I know obviously there's the rules rep and that if there's a chair, but that's a subcommittee, if you will, the COM, the rules rep office. The executive committee is a committee or an offsite. There's the IT director that was established last year. Excuse me if I get the wrong nomenclature in there, but I know we got somebody around the IT stuff. Are there any others?
The ombudsman program is sort of a subcommittee of the COM. I mean, they were established by the COM and essentially work for the COM. So I guess that might be another subcommittee.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't really report back to the COM other than to say, here's what's going on. But so.
So AIBOD.
And then the AIBOD is, it's kind of weird because from a legal perspective, the COM is a subcommittee of Amtgard International, but the way that Amtgard International is set up, the COM elects and directs the board of directors. Like that committee has, like seriously, if the AIBOD went in and said, hey, we're going to do these things that Amtgard doesn't want to do, the Circle of Monarchs could, in a flash say, oh, by the way, you're all fired. And we're going to put somebody in who's actually going to do what we want them to do. So they're sort of a subcommittee, but not really.
Sure.
It's kind of weird.
No problem. Okay. I think we've had this conversation before, but so how long, are there any term limits? Are there any, like it's a 1 year as rules rep, it's 1 year on the executive committee, ombudsman, IT director? How are they appointed?
So the COM hires and fires all of those people kind of at their will. Rules reps are hired by their kingdoms and they serve for however long
I
their
apologize.
kingdoms.
I meant the organizer themselves.
The rules rep organizers, I serve a 2-year term, but there hasn't been anybody else who wanted to do it really. So I think I'm on my 3rd 2-year term now. I'm in the middle of it. My term is up at Clan next year. I haven't decided if I'm going to do it again or not. But so that's a 2-year term. The XCOM doesn't have term limits. They're just whenever the COM wants them to be or doesn't want them to be. The ombudsman doesn't really have term limits. They just work until they get burnt out and then we find somebody new. And the IT director was just appointed, so he doesn't have again, no term limit, but
Okay.
whenever the BOD wants him to.
The Circle of Monarchs itself. Are the kingdoms beholden to the decisions made by the Circle of Monarchs? And are they like an appellate that if I have a problem going on in my kingdom that I was banned and it's absurd, is that the kind of stuff I take to the Circle of Monarchs?
So-
What do I take to the Circle of Monarchs?
That's happened with like the absurd banning and the policy at the time, because I was monarch at the time. So the policy at the time for the Circle of Monarchs was basically that's a kingdom issue and you guys need to handle this internally.
So ideally with stuff like that, where you get into local stuff, you want to go to the ombudsman. When it comes down to like personal local park level issues, if your king or queen isn't doing their job, you should be going to the ombudsman to talk about that and do something. But when it comes to like changes that affect all the parks in your kingdom, that's something you might bring to the Circle of Monarchs. If you think it affects a smaller group than that, then it's probably a job for your king or your ombudsman, like in that area.
So to answer the very first part of your question, yes, kingdoms are beholden to the decisions that the Circle of Monarchs make. We haven't ever gotten into a pissing contest about that, and I really hope we don't ever get into a contest about that, because that's just bad for Amtgard as a whole, right? I mean, that's a bad position. The Circle of Monarchs has traditionally very much taken the stance that Sponge articulated when it comes to issues within kingdoms. Like, how you run your kingdom is how you run your kingdom, and the Circle of Monarchs isn't going to try to tell you, no, you can't do that, or no, you must do that, except in very broad circumstances, such as, no, you can't let everybody play Paladin. You got to follow the rule book, guys. That's kind of how it works. Well, unless we change that this year, and then you can let everybody play Paladin if you want to.
Let's not do that.
Well, or no. You people decided they're going to make me make a committee again. Anyway. But the short version is the Circle of Monarchs, yes, exists to dictate policy Amtgard-wide, but that's really as much a social contract as it is a, like legal or forcible contract. The idea is the Circle of Monarchs should be representing the will of Amtgard as a whole, And we want you to follow those guidelines, and you're bound to follow those guidelines if you're going to be playing Amtgard, because Amtgard makes decisions, and that's how it works. But we haven't ever gotten into a, shouting match over that. And in the most part, the COM isn't going to come in and tell a kingdom how to run their day-to-day life. I mean, it's just not.
Oddly enough, this starts wrapping up. We're starting to approach that time. Obviously, Medryn's experience, Sponge, your experience has been vital. The other two of you, your perspective. I'm going to be following up with you. Promethea doesn't know this, but Nim'Ruin's in the car ride home. But following up because I really want to find out, okay, now you've gone through it. Let's have that conversation. Did it meet expectations? What do you need to, what will you do better next year? If you're still the king, if you're still the secretary, or maybe you're a king or queen yourself.
Maybe one
We'll have
day.
those conversations. Or, take a nap instead of spending 2 days of your events and meetings. But, so any last minute foot stomps though, and typically we'll stick again left to right. But if I'm only watching 5 minutes, from your perspective, what do I need to know in these last 5 minutes that I'm going to be watching? What do I need to know about the Circle of Monarchs and to really foot stomp? Nim'Ruin?
I'm probably gonna say, well, before I say that, I'm gonna say I feel like I shouldn't be up here because I learned more from this panel than I should probably be sitting over there and be right next to you taking notes. But it was actually, thank you for inviting me because this was amazing. I've learned so much. I would say key point awareness, know what you're gonna be discussing, because I think that's the problem that it could be take so long is because people really didn't look at what they're talking about or don't know what is going on. So be probably active in Amtgard, especially if you're going to sit in a monarch position.
Well, and you're not the first time monarch, the only first time monarch that's attending this, and there's a reason why a lot of people reach out to Crown and Flame to find out that information, and really appreciate the opportunity. I know you don't find value in it, but sometimes having somebody on the other side saying, hey, here's what I learned, is probably more valuable than
I wrote notes on the table.
And you wrote notes
I
for
can't
others on
take
the
it.
table. Promethea, how about you?
I think it's important just for people to remember the sort of symbiotic relationship between a king and then their group. If you elect, you should really be paying attention to who you're electing, because if you elect a shitty king and they come to the COM, they may not be representing you properly. Or if you are a shitty king and you don't listen to your populace, that you might not get the will of the people done when you come in to make your vote. I think it's just important if you're thinking of ever going into becoming a king or queen in your area, you should be really thinking about how can I do what's right by my people, and try exactly like Richie was saying, just try to get aware ahead of time so you can do the best job possible.
Sponge?
So really, I again see it as the most important meeting in the entirety of Amtgard. It's something that if you're going to come in and you're going to do, you should do with the mindset of doing what's in the best interest of the entirety of Amtgard, not necessarily your kingdom. That's, some people have done that, some people haven't. It's dependent on the person that comes in, really, and it's probably the most important thing in Amtgard is the Circle of Monarchs and dictating the policy and the procedures and how the game is going to run itself. Basically, don't be a jackass.
Got it. How are you going to follow that, Medryn?
Don't be a jackass is generally a good rule. I'll actually make two comments. I'll make comments for those who are looking at sitting on the Circle of Monarchs, being, I'm going to be a king, what should I know? And I'm going to reiterate, pay attention beforehand. Don't just come in and be oh, hey, what are we talking about? This is really important. This is 10 years ago, the Circle of Monarchs meeting was, hey, we're kind of going to talk about this rulebook stuff and what's going on. Today, the Circle of Monarchs is literally directing the course of Amtgard's future, which is really freaking cool if you think about it. Because what it means is that you, as a monarch, as a representative of your kingdom, have the ability to direct the way that this game moves, the entire future of this game, and that's awesome. From a populist perspective, what I'm going to tell you is, hey, pay attention. Again, this is Amtgard governing itself, and it's not always sexy, and it's often in 9-hour meetings that nobody really wants to sit through. But this is important stuff that, if you don't care, you don't care. But hey, for the first time in the history of Amtgard, we've come to a point where the kingdoms get to decide what the rule book looks like. The kingdoms get to decide what contracts are going to look like. The kingdoms get to decide how kingdoms are going to be made in the future. This is really big stuff. So it's worth paying attention to. Even if you're not going to come sit in the meeting, be informed about the fact that the Circle of Monarchs is doing work on your behalf and have some idea of what that is. Because at the end of the day, we all do this because everybody likes swinging sticks at each other, and we like dressing up in funny clothes, and we like, playing a game. But that game has a society, and that society really deserves to have people working in it to move that society in the direction that everybody wants to go. We're growing up as a game, and that's really cool. It helps if you're aware of that, so that our populace knows exactly what's going on. So pay attention.
I have one caveat, because I'm a horrible moderator and there's an important question. Who represents freeholds on the Circle of Monarchs?
Nobody. No. You don't have a voice, but that's not entirely true. Technically, the freeholds fall kind of under the governance of the Burning Lands. I mean, and as we're shifting towards the AIBOD, the Burning Lands isn't necessarily in control, and we're gonna have. That's actually a really good question, and maybe something that we should talk about on the Circle of Monarchs at some point. Is, do the freeholds need a representative, and what does that look like? Because right now it used to be the Burning Lands, because all the Burning Lands was in control of governing them. I don't know if the Burning Lands wants to do that anymore. That's part of the shift over to the Amtgard International. It's a very good question, and I don't have a real solid
I would
answer.
love to give credit to it, but since all the questions sent in are anonymous, I don't know, but hopefully they'll watch it and they'll be proud that they added to your 9-hour meeting tomorrow. All right, so what a great way to, but seriously, what a great way to end the panel. The inputs, the perspectives are invaluable. So thank you all for taking time out of your event to spend an hour with us covering something that we haven't shown a lot of light on. And like you said, it's going to be invaluable as we move forward in what the future of Amtgard is going to look like. So if I could, a quick round of applause for our panel members. A round of applause for the amazing volunteers that helped put all this together. And thank you everybody online and personally in attendance today. Thanks for spending some time with us.